Welcome back, guys, to the channel where we cover everything Harry Potter Quidditch Champions. To kick things off, I just want to say thank you guys for all the support on the last video. It took a long time to put together, and likewise, so did this one. With that said, if you want to continue to support videos like this, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It is really appreciated. Anyway, not going to waste any more time. Let's get straight into it. So the first thing I want to test for this video comes from a comment by Lake3749, in which he asks how the different speed stats affect keepers when they're diving between goalposts and just in general moving between goalposts. So first, we're going to figure out if maneuvering speed has any effect on this. And to do that, we're starting with the shooting star broom and then comparing that to the Nimbus once again, because they have the same speed stat but different maneuvering speeds. The Nimbus being a maneuvering speed of 5 and the shooting star being a maneuvering speed of 1. Alright, so to do this, we're going to start centered on the goalposts, and then we're just going to dive between the different hoops and measure the time it took to get to the different positions. So, another interesting result. From the numbers, we can see that the Nimbus did perform marginally better than the shooting star and also has a higher maneuvering speed. However, for the first dive from being centered of the goalpost to the left hoop took the same time on both the Nimbus and the shooting star. Taking the average into account, the Nimbus is slightly faster. So the last thing I want to test before we get to just the keeper's non-diving movement is diving from the right goalpost to the left goalpost. And once again, the data here seems to draw us to the same conclusion. It is a little weird that dive number 2 for the Nimbus was half the time of dive number 1. Not sure if something weird kind of happened there, but looking at the results of the shooting star, how dive number 1 was 0.98 seconds, dive number 2 0.96. Even if the Nimbus's numbers were more closely aligned to the first dive, it still would be marginally faster. Notably, here we have a much larger gap in the results. Now, some of this might be due to pathing. Maybe I took a more direct line on one broom versus the other. But from what we know about all the other broom stats, usually the difference is very small. Also in testing, since I'm not diving, I'm actually controlling my character when I get over to the hoop. I might not be exactly centered of the goal. So I went frame by frame and tried to take the time of when I was most centered in the goal hoop. But we can clearly see that based off of these numbers, there is a bigger difference than usual. Supporting the maneuver speed definitely helps you move around as a keeper. So now looking at all of the data we collect, we can clearly see that the Nimbus in every test was slightly faster than the shooting star, and the major difference between them is their maneuvering speed. We don't see too big of a difference between them when it comes to just diving between hoops, but we see a much larger distance when it comes to just moving around the hoops as opposed to diving, leading to the conclusion that maneuvering speed might have a small impact on your actual diving speed, but a large impact at your standard moving speed. Again, no test is truly perfect, but this is as close as I could get. So the next thing we want to test is dodge cooldown. And to do this, we're going to be comparing the Comet, which has a dodge cooldown rating of 6, against the Firebolt, which only has a dodge cooldown rating of 1. So testing for this is going to be pretty simple. Here I am on the Comet as a chaser. I'm going to press the evade button and then go back through the video and count how many seconds it took for the cooldown to refresh. Taking a close look at the results, we clearly see that the Comet got its ability to dodge back faster. by about half a second, which actually lines up pretty perfectly since it's 5 levels higher than the Firebolt, meaning we could assume that for every level of dodge cooldown, you get 0.1 second off of your cooldown restriction. So the next one that a lot of people had questions on is the stun duration multiplier. You guys want to know if this pertains to you or if it pertains to the stuns you pull off on your opponents and what the difference is. First, we're going to start by just testing how long we get stunned. And to do this, we're going to be using the shooting star, which has a stun duration multiplier of 5, and comparing it against the Nimbus, which only has a stun duration multiplier of 1. So the way we're going to test this is there's going to be a beater on the opposing team. I'm going to get whacked by a bludger, and then see how long it takes for all of my abilities to come off of cooldown after getting hit. Looking at the results, something a little unexpected happened. Obviously, it took longer for the abilities to come back on the Nimbus than the shooting star, which makes sense since the stun duration multiplier is only 1 on the Nimbus and 5 on the shooting star. However, for the shooting star, your abilities like the one-timer kick came back just a hair faster than your ability to actually dodge. This wasn't the case with the Nimbus, as everything came back exactly at the same time. Thought that was a little weird. Alright, and to answer the second part of this question, I had to do a lot of digging through some of my old streaming VODs. I managed to find 2 clips where in both I'm using the Legacy Broom, and the broom between the beaters are different. So the whole time I'm using this broom, which has a stun duration multiplier of 2. In the first clip, the first beater is also using this broom, so he'll have the same stun duration multiplier, but in the second clip, the beater is using a Firebolt, which has a stun duration multiplier of 4, so we can accurately compare the difference. And here we have the results of that test. Something a little interesting to note is that while I got hit by the player using the Legacy Broom, both my drift and dodge came back at the exact same time. When I got hit by the player on the Firebolt, they did not. There's a bit of a larger gap between the two. However, seeing as the stun duration multiplier on the Legacy is lower than the Firebolt, I don't think these numbers align with the idea that stun duration multiplier affects your opponent. One other thing to take into consideration though is I don't know the broom levels of the opponent's brooms. Unfortunately, since there is no custom matchmaking in the game yet, that's not something I can control in this type of test. So it's possible that their Legacy Broom was higher level and their Firebolt was lower level, and maybe that affected the results. Alright, and the last question we're going to be answering in this video comes from Anime Addict 2012. And their question is whether or not max health affects your health regen rate. To do this, we're going to be using the Legacy Broom, since it has a max health of 5 and a health regen of 2, and comparing it with the Nimbus that has a max health of 3 and a health regen of 2. So since the health regen rates are the same, we'll get a much better understanding on how maximum health plays a role. And looking at these final results, we see that there really isn't much of a difference between the two, even though one has slightly higher max health than the other. They both have the same health regen. The biggest difference seems to be between the first regen, but it's so minuscule that it almost doesn't really matter in my opinion. So with this, I'm willing to say that max health doesn't have too much of a factor when it comes to your health regen. In fact, the broom with the higher max health got to full HP sooner than the one with lower max health. So I don't think health regen is affected much by max health really at all. Whew! That's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for all the support on the last video. I hope the improvements I made to displaying the results helped make the information easier to understand and a little more digestible, and I hope I was able to answer most, if not all, of your questions. If there's a question you want answered that wasn't answered in part 1 or this video, please leave it in a comment below. And again, thank you guys.